Hello and welcome to our Classic Films channel. My name's Mark. I'm someone who's watched a lot of films. I've been involved in the filmmaking process. I've studied films for many years. I've been involved in film societies for well over a decade. And for the last 7 years, I've run a Classic Film Society. I've seen an awful lot of really good films, and I've seen not just as many, but certainly too many really unfortunate films and films that really weren't worth my time. The reason why we put this channel together is to try and help you make better decisions and more well-informed decisions about the films that you choose to see. We tend to think that some of the better choices out there, so maybe some choices you haven't considered, are classic films. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the what, when, who, where, why and how of film. And we're going to give you that information to better arm you with making good decisions about the films that you choose to watch. So what defines a classic film? Essentially it's its impact and its influence. That could be the impact that it's had on you as an individual. Films change us as people. The experiences we have help us to think differently and help us to look at issues in different ways and potentially change our minds about the way we believe the world should work. By extension, that means that these films also have an influence on the society in which we live. So films can be very brave, they can take on very challenging issues, and they can help the public to have a more open and honest and broader discussion about particular issues. And then films have an influence on filmmakers and filmmaking. So there's a very long history of film. Most of our great filmmakers are also film fans. They've watched a lot of films. They've been influenced by filmmakers that came before them. You may well find that watching contemporary films is better informed by being aware of what came before this particular film or this particular filmmaker. Films are of a particular time, and I do encourage people to reflect back on the time in which films were made. Inform yourself of some of the beliefs and understandings and practices of that particular time, and where you can, try and view a film through the eyes of audiences for which the film was made in the first place. Clearly that's not entirely possible, but the great thing about classic films is they're timeless. While they are of their time, they still are very contemporary in many ways. They may well have very progressive and even contemporary attitudes towards particular subjects. Again, they're looking at things at times which are timeless. So human relationships. The problems we have now are the problems we've had, I guess, sort of since time began, or since people started deciding to sort of kind of form relationships. So as a result, watching great old films can be as much an enjoyable experience today as it was when these films were first released. Since the earliest days of cinema, audiences have chosen to buy a ticket, to go into a cinema, to take their seat because of people. Those people may well be the actors, they may be the directors, they could be the producers, they could be the composers, they could be the writers as well. For a long time, and to this day, film publicity does tend to mention the stars. So with our reviews, we're going to focus on what were the draw cards, or maybe what is the contemporary draw card. What's the reason why you should watch this film again today? So actors do have star power. Certain people from cinema's history do have a real screen presence, and we can still see that today. So some of the reasons why we're going to recommend you watch some of these old films is the star power of those particular actors. Equally, actors brought great performances to the screen as well. So we will also let you know about times in which you don't want to miss a particular performance. Thankfully, it was recorded for posterity and something we can enjoy, to this day. There is an auteur theory of filmmaking, the idea that a film has an author. And for many people, the author of a film is the director. And the director has lots of control, despite the fact that so many people's efforts go into making a film what it is. Now, directors certainly will have a particular visual style, they'll have a particular kind of story that they like to tell, they will have a particular way of bringing these stories to the screen, and many of them have great skill in that they can bring wonderful performances out of actors as well. So choosing a particular director and watching a series of their films can be a great way, number one, to see the way that a director has changed over time and that their approach to film has changed. But equally, if you like one film by a particular director, you may well find that you like a number of films by that particular director. So that can be a good way of choosing a great film to watch. Now, films are storytelling, and they've been sourced from writers. So the source material may well have been a novel, it may have been a stage play, on occasion it may have been things like a poem or even someone's life. And there are also a special kind of writer called screenwriters who actually write specifically for film. Sometimes they'll adapt that source material, sometimes they'll write original stories as well. So while novelists and playwrights tend to be better known people, screenwriters tend to be a little bit invisible and a little less well known. So we will highlight some of the great screenwriters, some of the great work that they've done, and how that's actually led to a great film and a film that we'd recommend for you to watch. So why classic films? Number one, there's a very, very large back catalogue. Film is well over 100 years old. There are many, many titles, more than you could ever watch in your lifetime. So that's why a little bit of guidance might be a good way to get to the films that you really, really want to see and to avoid as many of the films that you don't. Now, film is a very complex process. A lot of things need to go right for a film to work on the screen. And for some potentially great projects, that didn't happen, and the film as a result isn't as great as it could have been. On the other side, there are many films that no one expected very much of, which turned out to be wonderful. And that's because the stars aligned. Everything seemed to come together, everyone worked beautifully, and they produced a wonderful end product. All the films that you see do have a backstory, and what we're going to do is we're going to share some of those backstories with you, especially in situations where we think it's actually led to a better product and a great film experience and a film that we'd really recommend that you watch. Films were made in a particular time and a particular place, and that place in which they were made does influence the film. They were made in potentially different cultures to yours, and that's going to influence the way in which you experience a film. Equally, foreign languages, reading subtitles is something that doesn't appeal to a lot of people, but I'd encourage you not to be too discouraged by that. There are many, many great foreign language films that are worth watching as well. But the way that I really want to talk about is the way you watch these films. Films were designed for the cinema. Now, if we go back to the heyday of cinema, from the 20s to the 50s, at that same time, in addition to making great films, they also built beautiful places in which to watch films, places they called picture palaces. They were incredibly ornate, they were wonderful structures to walk into, they had a really beautiful feel to them as well. And in some cases, the actual act of walking into the cinema was potentially more enjoyable than the film you ended up watching on the big screen. Now, none of us have the resources to build our own picture palace, but we do have the resources to try and recreate that cinema experience as much as we possibly can ourselves. So that can include, finding a place to project an image. So you want to make it as big as you possibly can, make it a nice surface to project on. If you don't have a great wall, there are plenty of screens you can look at purchasing, which will do a great job. Look at the equipment you're using, so you're getting great picture resolution. Look at sound quality, so your sound equipment, making sure that it sounds great and it has a cinematic appeal. Equally, think about echo, so having curtains in a room can be a good way to absorb sound, so you're not having any of those particular issues. And try to watch it with other people. Going to the cinema or watching a film is actually a group experience. It's very different to watching it on your own. So get some friends together, watch some of these films, listen to the reactions that other people have who are watching the same film as you, because that'll change your perception of the film. And it's also a great opportunity to have a chat afterwards, see what other people saw in a film, and from that learn something a bit different about the film that you've actually watched. Now, given that some of the films we're going to recommend are older, maybe a little bit obscure, they may be harder to find. So the place I would probably start is with the internet. Find your favorite search engine, type in the title that you're looking for. You'll find a lot of films are actually available to stream. Many of them will be free to stream. Some you may need to pay a small fee for. If you don't have any luck there, think about your local library. Many of them have DVD and Blu-ray collections that you can borrow for essentially no cost. The last thing I recommend is potentially buying DVDs or Blu-rays. Don't be put off by the fact that there's some expense involved, because you can potentially share them around friends or family. You can look at sort of kind of moving them on through reselling them. There's plenty of online markets in which to do that as well. Equally, there's many ways to buy good secondhand copies of particular films. So what I'd encourage you to do is subscribe to this channel. Keep an eye out for all of the new reviews that we're going to be releasing about every fortnight or so. Watch the review, take on board what we're telling you about these particular films, and make a decision about whether this is a film for you. And if it is, hunt down a copy of that particular film, watch it, and I hope you get to enjoy a lot of great classic films.